I want to talk to you about the successes in childbirth. I've done two other videos. One is on the gaps, and the other is about GIGO, garbage in and garbage out. We are where we are, in hindsight, after my 50 years in this conversation, because we've done what we've done. What I have also done for 50 years is to carry forward a message that hundreds of fathers and mothers asked me to bring forward, which was a concept, an idea, with words attached and actions attached about really how we should approach childbirth in order to have more successes, less gaps, and less GIGO. And that concept is that 100% of pregnant women are going to give birth, one way or another. When we look at successes around childbirth, we have to look at them from an individual basis, from a middle ground basis, or something in between, or a group or a niche, and then broadly into that 100% of pregnant women are going to give birth. So the concept families ask me to carry forward is attached to that broad one. 100% of pregnant women are going to give birth. But let's start with individual successes. If we know somebody who has had a baby and they might say to you, I had the home birth I wanted, or I had a wonderful midwife, or at least I lived, or my baby lived, or it wasn't too painful, or I used skills that helped me stay in control, or my husband was wonderful. Those are individual successes. And they can't be denied. Every woman's experience of the activity of birthing her baby is a lifelong memory. So we accept individual successes. However, in the past 50 years, they have not been the broadest in the world. In other words, women birthing aren't saying things like, great birth, wonderful birth. So we know that the successes can be built on. And our experience is you build on them by filling the gaps and having less garbage in and garbage out. So now let's look at sort of that middle space or that niche, and that happens to be called the natural birth movement. The natural birth movement really started in sort of the 1950s after the post-World War. It wasn't global until the 1980s, although there was some exchange of ideas. And three male obstetricians, Lamaze, Bradley, and Grantley Dick Reed, created skills-based methods and a philosophical approach to childbirth with Grantley Dick Reed, Childbirth Without Fear. And those three male obstetricians created an approach to childbirth which was for low-risk women to become skilled, to learn breathing and relaxation. And from Grantley Dick Reed's viewpoint, not to fear birth, to just trust it. And fathers were trained as birth coaches. Bradley was called husband or father coach childbirth. How did fathers get involved? We wanted them there. We didn't want to be left alone to discover birth any longer. We wanted some help. And so my generation from the 50s until the mid-70s in the United States, multiple millions of us took the two skills-based classes that were available, which were Lamaze and the Bradley method. And I want to say it again, multiple millions of us. Obstetrical nurses and obstetricians for a generation saw multiple millions of women coming into hospitals in the United States with some level of skills, with fathers with some level of skills to help them. And we did that when there were no choices available to us. So we incurred all of the assessments, monitoring procedures that was considered to be the right standard of care. So when we look at success, at that point, low-risk women were separated from high-risk women, which then becomes GIGO, garbage in, garbage out, because 100% of pregnant women are going to give birth. So why are you separating? Why are you telling one group to use skills and not the other group? However, there was a phenomenal success, which did not actually align to the three goals of Grantley Dick Reed, Lamaze, and Bradley, which were for low-risk women to achieve a natural birth, pain-free labor, without medical care. However, the success from my generation that came from learning Lamaze and Bradley skills was that multiple millions of us reduced the second global childbirth goal, which was suffering. And I'm going to talk about the childbirth goals in just a few minutes. But we reduced the suffering. And obstetrical nurses and obstetricians for a generation throughout the United States saw that. And they loved working with us. They loved working with skilled families. So when we look at success of that period of time, The success predominantly was that multiple millions of us reduced suffering. We coped better, we managed better, we stayed on top of things, and our husbands helped us to do that, and that built our families. In the broad picture of things, not enough women achieved those three other stated goals: a natural birth, pain-free labor without medical care, which was the goal of Lamaze, Bradley, and Grantley Dick Reed, and the goal of the nascent natural birth movement. And so what happened was that the natural birth movement in the 80s spread an idea with words attached to it and actions attached to it, which was: cows and cats aren't taught to birth. Women don't need to be taught to birth. You just need choices. You need to make a birth plan. You know what kind of birth you want. So do the research and write your birth plan. Give it to your birth provider because you're paying them, and you should expect to get the birth that you want. Fathers shouldn't coach. They shouldn't tell women what to do. They should just support choices. And if possible, to do this very big thing, which is to protect the sacred space of birth. So not enough women achieve those three goals, which then becomes part of the gaps and part of garbage in, garbage out. So when we look at successes, we have to keep in mind that we really do want to have successes for the broadest number of pregnant women, because 100% of pregnant women are going to give birth one way or the other. One way to have success is to treat pregnancy and birth as though it's going to happen to 100% of those women, and not from low risk to high risk. And then we also have to learn from the success we had, which was skills helped everybody cope better when they used them, and that addressed the global childbirth goal number 2. Now, the first global childbirth goal is for a live mother. It was only in the 1980s that the idea that a live baby should be included in this, and that's due to the societal changes that occurred in developed countries in the late 70s and 80s that I talk about in other videos. Prior to the 1980s, the focus throughout time and place has been for a live mother, because every culture around the world knows that babies do die in birth, and every culture accepts the death of a baby because they lost between 20 and 30% of children under the age of 5, but they didn't want to lose a mother because there weren't very many childbearing women in any society. The second global childbirth goal was the suffering. In Lamaze and Bradley, the use of those skills by everybody in the United States who took the classes, whether they were high risk or low risk, indicated a huge success. We suffered less and we coped better, and we felt more empowered by that experience, particularly with our husband having skills to help us. And the third global childbirth goal is recovery, and that was one of the successes on an individual basis. I've recovered well from it, or my baby's recovered well from it. So when we go back on an individual basis, we will often hear those 3 global childbirth goals. Well, I survived it. I lived through it. I didn't die. My baby lived through it. I didn't suffer as much as I thought I was going to. And that could be because the woman had skills, or she was using the way that modern medicine approaches global childbirth goal number 2, which is to give pain medication. Now it's epidurals. And the third thing you often hear women say is, we're recovering. We're recovering fine. We've always expressed how we respond to those ubiquitous 3 global childbirth goals. So the question is, how do we have the broadest success about doing the activity of birthing our baby? And we know now how to do it. We just need to have skills for everyone. Yes, where you do have choices, couple them with skills. But skills need to be foundational, because many women don't have choices. Many women who have choices, their choices change, or they don't actually like what they chose. But you have to do the activity of birthing your baby. So do it with skills, and have your partner or other learn skills to help you cope when they can see and hear that you're having a bit of difficulty and are struggling a little bit. They can help you get back into control. And control doesn't mean you're controlling the experience. Control means you are responding to what is happening inside you and around you rather than reacting. In other words, skills give you something to do. You work through the activity rather than the birth just happening to you. We couple our skilled mind with the voice inside us. Our voice doesn't have to like 1 second of the experience. When we have skills, we then apply our management skills to a situation we don't like. And that is good for the rest of life. We have many times we don't like work, we don't like our kid, we don't like our partner, we don't like a lot of things. But when we have skills, we stay in control more and stay on top of things, cope and manage and handle and deal with things that we don't like. So when we look at successes, can we grow a self-learning skilled birthing population? Yes, 50 years of what we have been saying shows on an individual basis and in a collective basis of 100% of pregnant women that when women and men have become skilled, they feel they've birthed better. But we need to have that message now put out into the general population, because the message since the 80s has been that skills are not essential. Women instinctively know how to birth. But why do we assume that? When we're randy, we don't instinctively know how to be a good lover. When we're hungry, no baby instinctively knows what's good or bad to put into their mouth. We don't instinctively know how to cook. So why should we assume that we instinctively know how to birth? We don't. And since the 80s, too many people have been relying on choosing the birth they want and then finding that they don't have the success. And they feel embittered. And there's been a rise of shame, blame, guilt, disappointment, anger, frustration, and trauma after birth syndrome, because women didn't get the birth they wanted. And they were pissed off at what people did or didn't do around them. What we learned in the 50s, 60s, and 70s was that skills mattered, had a huge positive impact on the broadest number of people. But we had the message wrong. If the message had been 100% of pregnant women are going to give birth, you just need some skills, then what would have happened was more skills-based methods would have begun to evolve from these first simple skills that people tried to use. Sometimes they didn't work effectively. Lamaze breathing, very hard to maintain for hours. Bradley breathing in the nose, out the mouth can be a moan or a scream, as well as being relaxed. But no skills-based methods evolved for 20 years, with the exception of the Birthing Better skills, because we always promoted 100% of pregnant women are going to give birth one way or another, and fathers and others should be the birth coach, no matter where you give birth, no matter the type of birth. If you're going to have a cesarean, you can have a successful cesarean because you lived and your baby lived, and you recovered fine, and you didn't suffer because of the pain relief. But imagine if you used breathing and relaxation and communication and touch skills on the way to the hospital, while being prepped, and in surgery and afterwards. Think about being more engaged in the activity of birthing your baby. That's what leads to success. So we want to grow more success for the broadest number of people. And we know it's achievable because we had an experience that lasted for a generation in the United States when women totally lacked choices, and multiple millions of us had such a positive impact on childbirth and the pleasure that obstetrical nurses and obstetricians had from working with us. And we worked with and around all of the assessments, all of the monitoring, all of the procedures. And we birthed better because we were skilled. And that is a huge success.